The air inside the church was thick with flowers, music, and whispered blessings. Every guest turned to watch the bride glide down the aisle in her ivory gown, a vision of radiance. But behind her calm smile lay a storm. She kept looking over her shoulder, expecting to see her parents enter at any moment. The pew reserved for them remained hauntingly empty. When the ceremony began, the truth cut deeper than any blade. They were not coming. Minutes later, a cousin leaned over and whispered the words that would sear into her soul forever. "Your parents said to enjoy your wedding with a plumber." The insult rippled through the hall. Murmurs rose like a tide, pitying glances striking her harder than stones. She felt naked, humiliated, her cheeks burning while her groom tightened his grip on her hand. His eyes, steady and devoted, tried to assure her that love was enough. But the silence of her parents screamed louder than vows. As the priest continued, she forced herself to repeat the words of commitment, her voice trembling but defiant. If her parents wanted to shame her, she would not give them the satisfaction of breaking down in front of everyone. But inside, grief twisted her heart into knots. Later, outside the church, as rice and petals rained over the couple, her eyes caught something that shattered her further: her mother. Standing at the far edge of the courtyard, half hidden behind a pillar, watching. Their eyes met for a fleeting second. Her mother's face was pale, her lips quivering as if she wanted to speak, but just as quickly she turned away and disappeared into the crowd of strangers. Confusion mingled with rage. If her mother had come, why not step inside? Why let the cruel words spread like poison while she lingered in the shadows? That night, after the celebrations dulled into silence, she found herself at her parents' house. Anger had led her there, demanding answers. They were not home, but her mother's purse sat abandoned on the dining table. Something inside it caught her eye: an old photograph, worn at the edges, torn right down the middle. Her trembling fingers lifted it. There was her groom, younger, standing in a place that seemed strangely familiar. But beside him, the part of the image was ripped away, as if someone had deliberately erased a person from memory. Her breath hitched. Why would her mother carry a photograph of her husband? Why hide it, broken like a wound that refused to heal? Cliffhanger. With the torn photograph in her hands, her heart pounded with dread. The wedding humiliation was only the beginning. Something far darker lay beneath her parents: cruel absence. The honeymoon glow was short-lived. Back in their modest home, the newlyweds tried to settle into married life, but whispers clung to them like shadows. Everywhere they went, at the market, at church, even walking down the street, people leaned in close to each other, their voices hushed but cutting. Her parents did not bless the marriage. She chose a plumber. Something must be wrong with him. The bride smiled through it, holding her head high, but every word chipped at her confidence. Her husband worked harder than ever, as if his calloused hands could shield her from gossip. Yet the silence from her parents was louder than the rumors. Days passed, then weeks, and still not a word, not a visit, not even a letter. Finally, she could no longer endure it. She returned to the house where she grew up, the walls of her childhood now heavy with bitterness. Her mother opened the door, her expression stiff, her eyes carefully avoiding her daughter's. Inside, her father sat in his chair, staring at the television without really watching it. "Why?" she demanded, her voice breaking. "Why did you humiliate me like that? Why didn't you come to my wedding?" Her mother pressed her lips together, refusing to speak. Her father's jaw tightened, but he kept his gaze fixed ahead, as if she were not even there. The silence was unbearable. She stepped closer, trembling with anger. "You've made me the laughingstock of the entire town. Do you hate me that much? Or is it him you hate?" Still nothing. Her mother's hands fidgeted with the hem of her dress. Her father's breathing grew heavier. The air in the room thickened with secrets, with truths left unsaid. The front door creaked open. Her husband had followed her. He stepped inside, his presence filling the space with quiet defiance. Her mother flinched at the sight of him. Her father finally looked up. his eyes locked on the groom's, and for a brief second, all the strength drained from his face. The old man's hands trembled violently as he tried to stand. His voice, rough and low, broke the silence at last. "You should have never married him." He pointed a shaking finger at his daughter, then at the man she loved. His face turned pale, his body unsteady. The bride froze, fear and confusion tangling in her chest. "What do you mean?" she whispered. Her father's eyes darted between them, filled with something more than anger, something closer to terror. "Cliffhanger." In a voice so low it barely escaped his lips, he whispered, "You don't know who he really is." Her father's trembling words haunted her long after she left her childhood home. "You don't know who he really is." They circled her mind like a curse. She tried to dismiss them as bitterness, old prejudice, anything but truth. Yet, as the weeks passed, the doubt began to grow. Her husband had always been steady, dependable, a man who worked with his hands and carried himself with quiet pride. But lately, shadows crept into his behavior. He came home later than usual, claiming extra jobs. She would hear him speaking in hushed tones on the phone, his voice dropping the moment she entered the room. A drawer in their bedroom remained locked, the key always missing. She wanted to believe it was nothing, just the paranoia her parents had planted. But the silence pressed too hard against her chest. Every unanswered question felt like a secret waiting to strangle her. One evening she decided to confront him. The dinner table was set, the candles flickering, the food growing cold. He was late again. When he finally walked in, he kissed her on the cheek, but his eyes seemed distant. She placed her hand on his arm. "Where do you go every night?" she asked softly. He stiffened. "Work. You know that. Work does not whisper on the phone and hide letters in drawers." Her voice shook. "Tell me the truth." His gaze darkened, but instead of answering, he pulled away. "Some things are better left alone," he said, his tone flat. Then he walked past her, leaving the food untouched. Her heart pounded with suspicion. Later that week, she attended a family dinner, hoping to distract herself. Her mother sat across the table, avoiding her eyes as always. But halfway through the meal, the wine loosened her tongue. "He should have never entered this family," her mother spat suddenly, her voice cutting through the chatter. The table fell silent. "His blood is tainted by old debts, debts that destroyed us once before." The words struck like a thunderclap. Her husband froze, his fork halfway to his lips, his jaw tightening. He pushed back his chair, his face unreadable, and left the room without another word. The bride's chest burned with confusion and fear. What debts? What destruction? Her mother refused to explain, falling into silence once more. That night, unable to resist, she slipped into her parents' study. Dusty drawers held relics of the past. Old letters, forgotten ledgers, yellowing papers. And there, folded carefully among the records, she found it. A newspaper clipping from decades ago. The headline screamed of scandal. A name leapt from the page. Her husband's family name, tied to betrayal, money, and ruin. Cliffhanger. Her fingers shook as she clutched the clipping. Her father's warning echoed in her mind. Who had she really married? The old newspaper clipping lay heavy in her trembling hands. By candlelight, she read the words over and over, hoping somehow the letters would rearrange themselves into something less damning. But there it was in bold print, her husband's family name, forever tied to betrayal and scandal. The story told of a man, her husband's late father, who had once worked for her family, trusted, respected, then accused of deceit. His actions, or at least the accusations, had led to a financial collapse that had nearly ruined her parents' fortune decades ago. The room spun. Her husband had never spoken of this. Her parents' cruelty, their humiliation at the wedding, suddenly took on a darker shade. To them, history was repeating itself, the sins of the father reborn in the son. But why had her husband hidden it from her? Was it shame? Or something more sinister? The next morning, she confronted him. She laid the clipping on the table, her voice shaking. "Why didn't you tell me?" He stared at the yellowed paper, his face unreadable. "Because it was not my crime," he said quietly. "And because I knew they would use it against me. Against us." Her chest tightened. "But you knew. You knew they hated you for it, and you said nothing." His eyes softened, pain flickering in their depths. "I said nothing because I love you. I was not going to let their past decide our future." The words should have comforted her, but suspicion gnawed at her heart. Love or revenge? Was his marriage to her an act of devotion, or a quiet strike against the family who destroyed his own? Days later, while tidying the attic in her parents' home, she stumbled upon a trunk filled with old letters bound in a faded ribbon. She untied it, curiosity overtaking hesitation. Her hands trembled as she read the ink-stained words, written in her mother's delicate script. Letters not to her father, but to another man. Letters filled with longing, regret, and passion. Her breath caught as she recognized the name. It was her husband's father. Every letter spoke of a love that should never have been, of secret meetings, of dreams they could not pursue, and then of betrayal, the same betrayal that had supposedly ruined the family. Her knees weakened beneath her, the room spinning. Her mother had not only known her husband's father, she had loved him. Cliffhanger. At the bottom of the trunk, she found one final envelope, never opened. The seal bore her mother's handwriting, and the name written on it was her husband's. The unopened envelope haunted her. She kept it hidden beneath her pillow, too afraid to break the seal, too terrified of what truths might spill out. The letters had already exposed more than she could bear. Her mother's forbidden love for her husband's father, the possibility that everything she thought she knew about her family was a lie. Her husband noticed the change in her. She was quieter, restless at night, her eyes always clouded with suspicion. Finally, one evening, she confronted him again. "I found the letters," she whispered, her voice cracking. He froze, then looked away. "So now you know." "Know what?" she snapped. "That my mother loved your father? That our families are tied together by betrayal?" Her hand shook as she grabbed his arm. "Why didn't you tell me?" His jaw tightened. "Because it was not my story to tell. It was theirs." His voice softened, almost pleading. "I married you because I love you, not because of them. Not because of what they did." But his confession carried a weight she could not ignore. He had known about the feud all along. Had he married her for love or to finish a war started decades ago? Her doubts festered. At the next family gathering, tension boiled over. Her father refused to even look at her husband. Her mother avoided his gaze, but trembled whenever he entered the room. Every meal ended in silence. Every word was a weapon waiting to be used. Then came the night everything cracked open. Unable to sleep, the bride wandered through her parents' garden. Voices drifted from the terrace. She crept closer, her heart pounding. There they were, her mother and her husband, alone, their faces inches apart in the moonlight. She saw her mother clutch his hand, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I never wanted it to be this way," her mother whispered. "You remind me so much of him. Every time I see you, it's like the past won't let me go." Her husband's face was unreadable, torn between anger and sorrow. "We can't change the past," he said quietly. The bride's breath caught in her throat. Her worst fear clawed at her chest. Was this grief or something more? Cliffhanger. She staggered back into the shadows, her heart breaking. The image of her mother's hand and her husband's burned into her mind. What connected them now? Memory? Guilt? Or forbidden desire? The image of her mother's trembling hand and her husband's lingered in her mind like poison. Night after night, the bride replayed the scene. The tears, the whispers, the intimacy she should never have witnessed. It was not just grief. It was not just memory. It felt like something deeper, something forbidden. At breakfast the next morning, she could no longer keep her silence. Her husband sat across from her. sipping coffee as if nothing in the world was wrong. She slammed her cup onto the table, shattering the fragile calm. "Why was my mother holding your hand?" she demanded, her voice raw. He froze, the cup halfway to his lips. Slowly he set it down. "You should not have been spying." "Spying?" She shot back, her eyes blazing. "A wife does not have to spy on her husband if there is nothing to hide." His silence was louder than words. Later that evening she stormed into her parents' home. Her mother was in the kitchen, her hands busy with dishes, her face pale as porcelain. "How long?" the bride hissed. "How long have you been sneaking around with him?" The plates clattered in her mother's hands. "What are you talking about? Do not lie to me. I saw you." "I saw the way you looked at him. I heard your words. What do you want from him? From me?" Tears welled in her mother's eyes, but she turned away. "Some truths will destroy you. Leave them buried." But the daughter refused. She grabbed her mother's arm, shaking it. "Is he your lover? Tell me!" Her father's booming voice shattered the room. He had entered unnoticed, his face red with fury, his fists clenched. "Enough!" he roared. "You dare accuse your mother of such filth? You dare shame this family more than you already have?" The bride's blood ran cold. His rage was violent, unhinged, and his eyes burned with something close to madness. "It is betrayal," he spat. "All of you! Betrayal is in your blood!" Her mother sobbed. Her husband stood silent in the doorway, his expression unreadable, like a man balancing on the edge of a secret, too dangerous to speak. The bride's chest heaved, her world collapsing around her. Every answer only led to darker questions, every silence screamed of guilt. Cliffhanger. That night she hid in the hall, and through the thin walls of her parents' house, she overheard her mother's voice whispering to her husband, "If she ever finds out the truth, everything will be destroyed." The whispered words tore through her like knives. "If she ever finds out the truth, everything will be destroyed." Her mother's voice, her husband's silence, together they painted a picture more terrifying than any rumor. For days, she could not eat, could not sleep. Every glance from her husband felt like a lie. Every word from her mother sounded rehearsed. Her father's rages grew worse, his paranoia spreading like fire through the household. The bride wandered between them all like a ghost, desperate for clarity, terrified of the answers. One evening she finally forced the confrontation. She gathered her parents and her husband in the living room, her heart pounding. "No more lies," she said, her voice sharp. "I deserve the truth. Every secret you've hidden, I want it now." Her mother's lips quivered. Her father paced like a caged animal. Her husband stood still, staring into the floor. And then, with a trembling breath, her mother spoke. "Years ago, before you were born, I loved another man, your father's most trusted employee, a man who betrayed this family. A man who is your husband's father." The room collapsed around her. She staggered backward, her breath caught in her throat. "No," she whispered, "you're lying." But her mother's tears were real, spilling fast, unstoppable. "I tried to stop it," she sobbed. "I tried to keep you apart. But fate brought you back together." Her father roared, his voice shaking the walls. "She ruined everything once, and now she ruins it again. You think you married a man? But what if you married blood?" The bride's hands shook as she turned to her husband. His face was pale, stricken, but his eyes finally met hers. "I did not know until after we married," he said hoarsely. "I swear it, I did not know." But could she believe him? Her mother's letters, her father's rage, the photograph in the purse, every piece fell into place, painting a nightmare. She dropped to her knees, her chest heaving. The love that had once filled her life was now twisted into something forbidden, something unbearable. If her mother's words were true, then her husband was not just her partner, he was her half-brother. Cliffhanger. Her father slammed a fist onto the table. "There will be no more guessing. We will know the truth." He pulled a DNA testing kit from a drawer, his hands shaking as he thrust it toward them. "We end this now." The DNA kit sat on the dining table like a curse, its sterile box glowing beneath the dim light. No one spoke, no one moved. The bride's father loomed over it, his face pale, his hands still trembling with fury. "We will have answers," he declared, his voice cracking with age and rage. "And when we do, there will be no more lies." Her husband reluctantly swabbed his cheek, then handed the stick over. His eyes never left hers, a mixture of fear and determination burning in them. "I will fight for us," he whispered as he passed her by. She wanted to believe him. She wanted his words to be stronger than the shadows strangling them. When her turn came, her hand shook so violently she nearly dropped the swab. Her mother hovered nearby, eyes wet with tears, whispering prayers no one wanted to hear. Her father sealed the kit, his jaw clenched, and stormed out of the room to send it away. The sound of the front door slamming echoed like a coffin lid shutting. The following days were suffocating. Every interaction was poisoned by suspicion. The bride looked at her husband and saw both the man she loved and the man who might never truly belong to her. Nights were long and restless, her dreams twisted with images of blood and betrayal. Her husband tried to reach her, tried to hold her, but she pulled away. The thought of his touch filled her with both longing and terror. What if the results confirmed the unthinkable? Meanwhile, her father grew increasingly unstable. He muttered to himself, cursed the past, threatened to expose everything to the world. "They should all know," he raged one evening, pounding the table. "They should all see how this family has rotted from the inside out." Her mother begged him to keep silent, but his paranoia only deepened. He paced the halls like a man hunted by his own ghosts, his eyes wild, his fists clenched. The bride watched in horror, realizing the truth was not only tearing her marriage apart, it was destroying the entire family. And then, one fateful afternoon, the envelope arrived, plain, white, and heavy with the weight of destiny. Her hands shook as she picked it up from the mailbox. Her husband stood behind her, silent, his breath shallow. Her mother hovered near the doorway, clutching a rosary, whispering for mercy. The bride tore the envelope open, her heart pounding in her ears. She unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the lines, her face drained of all color. Cliffhanger. A single gasp escaped her lips as the truth revealed itself on the page. The paper trembled in her hands, each word blurred, the lines twisting as tears welled in her eyes. The silence in the room was unbearable. Her husband stepped forward, his voice shaking. "What does it say?" She lowered the page slowly, her lips trembling. Her throat was dry, her body cold. "It's true," she whispered, the words breaking her soul in two. "You are my half-brother." The room shattered with the confession. Her mother collapsed into a chair, covering her face as sobs tore from her chest. Her husband staggered backward, pale and broken, his eyes wide with disbelief. "No," he muttered. "No, this can't be." But the paper did not lie. Their love, the vows they had spoken, the life they had dreamed, had been built on a foundation of blood and secrets. What had felt sacred now felt cursed. She fell to her knees, her voice cracking. "Why? Why didn't you tell me?" Her words were not directed at her husband but at her mother, who rocked back and forth in anguish. "I wanted to protect you," her mother cried. "I tried to stop this marriage. I begged you not to go through with it. But love is stronger than blood. That is why I could not." "Stronger than blood?" The bride spat, her grief turning to fury. "You call this love? You let me marry my own brother." Her husband collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. "I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know until it was too late." The bride's father stood in the doorway, his eyes burning with rage. His voice cracked like thunder. "This family is ruined. I warned you both, but no one listened. And now, his voice faltered, and for a moment he swayed on his feet. "Father," she whispered, rising in fear. He slammed a trembling hand on the table. "I will not let you inherit anything from me, none of you. You've disgraced my name, destroyed my bloodline." His breathing grew ragged, his chest heaving. "I rewrote the will. You are all disinherited." The room fell silent. Her mother gasped. Her husband lifted his head, his face wet with tears. The bride's heart pounded in her ears. Then, suddenly, her father clutched his chest, his face contorting with pain. His body crumpled to the floor, his final words barely audible. "You deserve nothing." Cliffhanger. The bride screamed as her father lay motionless, the rewritten will and the shattered truth hanging over them like a curse. The house was silent except for the toll of funeral bells echoing from the church across town. The bride stood in black, her veil trembling as the coffin lowered into the earth. Her father's sudden death had left a hollow ache, but the grief was twisted by fury. His last words, his final act, had not been of love, but of vengeance. He had stripped her, her husband, and even her mother of everything. No inheritance, no home, nothing but shame. Mourners whispered behind her, their pity laced with curiosity. The cursed family, they murmured. The scandalous marriage. The hidden affair. Her heart burned with humiliation, but she held her head high. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Her mother clung to her arm, her face pale and drawn. Every tear she shed only reminded the bride of betrayal, the affair, the lies, the secrets. She pulled her arm away, unable to offer comfort. Her mother's love had poisoned them all. Her husband stood apart, silent, distant. His eyes, once filled with devotion, now carried only torment. He had not touched her since the DNA results, had not shared her bed. They lived like strangers under the same roof, bound together by tragedy but torn apart by truth. That evening, after the mourners left, she found him packing his things. The sight nearly broke her. "You're leaving?" she asked, her voice trembling. He nodded, his face pale with grief. "I cannot stay. Every time I look at you, I see everything I lost. Everything we were supposed to be." His voice cracked. "I love you, but I can't live with this truth. We're cursed, both of us." Her chest constricted, but she did not beg him to stay. She simply watched as he walked out the door, the sound of his footsteps fading into the night. The house was quiet now, too quiet. She wandered through the rooms, each one echoing with memories of laughter, of arguments, of love that had turned to ashes. She was left with nothing. No husband, no parents, no fortune, only scars. Yet as she stood in the ruins of her life, something within her hardened. She would not be defined by their sins. She would rise, stronger than the lies, stronger than the shame. A knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, a man in a dark suit stood on the porch, holding a leather briefcase. "I am here on behalf of your father's estate," he said, his voice measured. "But there is something you do not know." He handed her a sealed envelope heavier than it looked. "There is another heir," he said. "A child your mother never told you about. A sibling, hidden all along." Final twist. The bride clutched the envelope, her pulse racing. Another secret, another betrayal, another truth waiting to destroy her.